All right, good afternoon, students. I wanted to record a quick lecture for these slides that we posted into the week 3 content folder. This won't be a super long lecture. It'll be pretty short because the memos are fairly similar to the emails. We're really just going to discuss some differences and then some important things to know about emails and really in letters going forward as well. So we will go ahead and get started talking about professional memos here. So what's the difference? What is the difference between memos and emails? So memos are generally internal documents. They're sent within departments, or among branches that are located in different geographic regions. So these are going to be internal documents, okay, as opposed to the emails, which were internal and external, right? They're not 24/7 like emails, like your book says, emails are 24/7. You're doing that, you can send them whenever you want throughout the day. These are typically not 24/7 like an email. Um, they're usually perceived as more formal than an email, and that's because you're trying to inform people with memos very often. Typically, you're trying to, hey, we're going to move the meeting to this place, or this is a new policy change that we have coming up that you need to be aware of. It's going to be things like that. So they're usually a little more formal than an email. It's like you may get an announcement, an email saying, hey, I think they're going to announce a new policy change or a new benefits change to our insurance package. And then when it actually officially happens, that's when you'll get the memo saying, hey, here's this memo. It's going out to all employees. We're changing the benefit package in these ways. So that's why they're a little more formal. Think of them in some sense as like a formal announcement of something. Um, so memos are where you're going to send that confidential information. When you have confidential information to send internally, this is where you're going to be utilizing a memo format to send that confidential information. So what's the same? We're going to still use the 6 C's of business communication. I'll remind you about what those are real quickly. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, you want to be consistent, you want to be correct, complete, and you want to be courteous in your communications. This is no different than the emails, right? If you do need further clarification on these, please don't hesitate to contact me. I will go back over these with you. But you can look in your book, you can look on the email slideshow or the email lecture, and all of that will be there as well. So planning your message is just as important as as planning an email message. So you should be spending more time planning your messages than you are actually writing your messages, right? Planning will alleviate and kind of mitigate the need for correction. It will mitigate the need for additional questions. It will mitigate conflict. Planning is an extremely important part of any business writing. Okay, so that goes for emails, memos, letters, anything that we are um, discussing and going over in this class. You need to be aware of the tone, just like in an email. You don't want to be sarcastic in your email, or excuse me, you don't want to be sarcastic in a memo, especially in a memo because like we said, these are a little more formal than an email, right? You don't want to use emoticons, obviously. You want to avoid overusing outdated phrases, and you want to leave out courtesy titles in the from line. And also, just like with the emails, use a spell check program like Grammarly to make sure that you're not sending out something that's just riddled with errors, right? So memo basics. You always want to consider your purpose. Why are you writing the memo, right? That's the first thing you should be thinking about. Why am I writing this memo? You always want to write with a specific purpose in mind. Okay, so are you writing to persuade or are you writing to inform? Are you writing to try to get somebody to take action on something, or are you writing to inform them about maybe a new policy or something like that? You always want to consider your audience's perspective. Again, this is just like with the emails. Try to think from your intended audience's eyes, right? Try to see from their perspective. So is the reader familiar with the topic? If it's something that they're familiar with, you can be a little more technical. You can use a little more jargon in it. If it's not, then you need to kind of break it down into layman's terms for them. Do they consider you an authority on the topic? So, like if I was writing to somebody about fraud, they may consider me an authority on that topic since I am a certified fraud examiner. However, if I was writing to somebody about, cost accounting, they may not consider me an authority because I'm not a certified management accountant. So you've got to think, do they consider me an authority? Are they going to take what I say as gospel? Are they going to take this as good news or bad news? That, again, that is going to change the approach that you take to writing the document. If it's good news, you want to be direct with it. You want to use that direct approach that we talked about and that you read about last week. If it's bad news, you want to take that indirect approach. You want to buffer that bad news with something in the beginning, a compliment or something like that. Again, just a reminder that you want to plan your message carefully. Again, that mitigates so many issues from the get-go. It's going to save so much time in the long run. And as accountants, you should be able to see the benefits of a long-term investment like careful planning. You want to make sure that your message is organized. So you want to organize it in a way that makes sense, in a way that is cohesive. If that means using section headers or lists or tables, you want to make sure that the message is organized and that it is easily digestible, so to speak. It's easy to understand for the reader. You always want to proofread, edit, and revise your memo. You also want to have somebody do a review of your memos, like the peer reviews that we're doing in this class. I know that they seem a little bit obnoxious and annoying, but it's so important to have somebody else, a fresh set of eyes, look at your work. They're going to catch things that you miss on occasion. So the format of a memo is very, very similar again to an email, right? You've got your header up there, which is the to line, the from line, the date line, and the subject line. The from line, I could technically put my credentials behind it. That way, I'm a source of authority on this subject or whatever the case may be. The subject, you want to make sure it's clear and concise. You don't want it to be vague and, a two-line subject. Very seldomly do you want a memo subject that's 2 lines long. Okay, and then you're going to have your introduction paragraph. You want to catch their attention and get to the point pretty directly. The body of the paragraph, where you're going to fill in the information for them. You're going to bust out all the detail that you need to know. And then your conclusion. You're going to remind them why you're writing, and in some cases, you're going to have that call to action if you were trying to write a persuasive message. And then at the end, obviously, your signature. I would recommend not using any salutations or sign-offs here. Simply just put your name and any credentials that you may have. That is the basic format. This is the format that I'm expecting to see when you write your memos this week. So refer to this, refer to your book, refer to the assignment prompt and the rubric, and that'll put you in good shape. So memos in the accounting profession. Generally, memos are short, but sometimes they can be a page or, over a page. They can be 2 pages. You get it into the length of a letter at that point, right? But generally, they're fairly short. When you do write longer memos, remember that you want to use formatting and mechanics, like section headers. You want to break it up a little bit and make it easier to read. If you have a bunch of numbers, you don't want to just type them out in a paragraph. You probably want to put them in a table and present them that way. It's just easier and more clear for the reader if you do that. Again, these are perceived as more formal than an email, but less formal than a letter. So internally, like I said, you're going to want to think of these as like the official announcement of something a lot of times. So the official announcement that we're giving pay raises this quarter, or, the official announcement that we're making changes to your benefit plans, things like that. Most often you're going to see these sent as an attachment to an email, but occasionally they'll just send it as the body portion of an email. I've seen that very rarely and only when the memo is not, critical and when it is fairly short. Most often you're going to see it attached as a memo, and the email message is going to say something like urgent or attention memo attached, something like that. Sometimes you'll see these referred to as memorandums. Literally, memo is just short for memorandum. So if you see that, don't be confused. Not that I would imagine many of you were, but I just wanted to point that out. So why do we use memos? One of the biggest uses I've seen in the accounting profession for using Memos is that it allows accountants to record information about clients, and you can kind of put that in the client's file. So, for example, if you were working taxes for a client, you may put some of their information, some of the confidential information that you may need to know in later years, like next year you're doing their taxes again, you can pull up their file and you've already got that information ready for you. So that's the biggest use that I've seen for accountants using Memos. But like I said, you also use them for certain announcements of changes to procedure and policy. Another good example is like when I was working at the state auditor's office, we used what we called an A10 work paper. And it was essentially a memo, and we kept it for all auditees that we audited on a regular basis. So we would have an A10 for like the Department of Natural Resources or the Department of Revenue or Department of Higher Education. We would keep an A10 work paper in our, what we call our prior work paper files, or our perm files, files that we were going to use every time we started that audit. That would be considered a permanent file, and the A10 was part of that. But we also would use them occasionally in like, if we went to do a petition audit or a fraud audit, we would keep information on employees, like which ones were helpful, which ones ignored requests, which ones were rude, which ones would try to give you things like a bottle of water or, a cookie or a sandwich or something like that. We would keep track of that information so that in the future, if we went to audit them again, we could, the new auditors could open that file and go, oh, okay, we got to look out. We got to be careful around so-and-so because they're snooping on us. They're spying on us. They're trying to figure out what we're doing and saying, things like that. Also, memos are just quick, they're inexpensive, and they provide a record of communication. When I worked for Mercy, I always kept records of conversations that I would have, of communication that I would have, just as kind of a CYB, a cover your butt memo, right? Because if a confrontation or we had a disagreement about something down the road, I could always pull those memos out and say, hey, this is what that communication was. This is exactly what that communication was on this and this date. And I always kind of had that record. And it was just a quick way to provide records of communications. It didn't always have to be bad. Sometimes it was, oh man, I forgot what we talked about. Let me check up on that. So one other thing you really need to be aware about is that there is business writing on the CPA exam. So in the business environments and concept portion, the BEC portion of the CPA exam, candidates are required to complete written tasks. That is part of your task-based simulation. You will definitely get one of these on at least one of these on your CPA exam, right? So these tasks, these written tasks that are part of your TBS, your task-based simulations, they're roughly 15% of your total score on your BEC. It's a significant chunk. I mean, if you're doing these correctly and you're confident in your abilities to write, you can 15% of your score, 15% of your 75 right there, you don't need to worry about, right? I will make a note that these may change and will likely change pretty significantly when it comes to the CPA evolution that's happening. This may be a good discussion for the happy hour thing that we're doing next week on Blackboard. If anybody chooses to attend, ask some questions about CPA evolution. Dr. Church, our department head here, is actually part of that. So she knows a lot about it. I may get with her this week and try to get a little more information. That way, if you guys do have questions, if you show up for that happy hour thing, we can talk about that. But just a note, there's a good chance that this will change somewhat when the new exams start being given. So basically, these tasks, they'll give you a situation, they'll request a response, and they will provide instructions. So here has been my experience with these types of questions. When I was studying for the CPA exams, I haven't sat for the BEC portion. There's just never really any reason for me to actually get my CPA. So I didn't sit for all 4 sections of it. But again, that's something you can ask me about during the happy hour thing. But my experience with studying for the exams and taking the review courses here at MSU for the exams is that they don't provide you anything other than the question and the demographics. So they will say, for instance, you have a client asking you what the tax treatment for such and such thing should be, or you have your manager is asking you how you feel you should be investing these, or what the figure to calculate the the future value of these present dollars, or whatever the case is. They're not going to give you how to do those things. They're going to expect you to know that, because that's something that a CPA is expected to know how to do, right? But they will provide you with the information that you do need to know to write one of these. These simulations require that you use a memo or a letter format to respond. So like I said, they're going to give you the information you need to know. Who are you? Obviously. Who do you work for? What are you a staff accountant? Whatever. Who are you writing to, and what the subject should be, right? So you're graded on two things here. You're graded on your technical content, which would be that, can you calculate the future value? Or, do you understand the tax treatment for this certain asset? That kind of thing. But you're also graded on your writing skills, so your grammar, your mechanics. Can you actually write professionally? Okay, so that's why, part of the reason why you're in this class, so you can learn to write professionally. It's helping prep you for portions of your CPA exam, as well as helping you transition from being a student to a professional, where they're just going to expect you to be able to do these things. They're not going to give you a rundown on how to write a memo, right? So just a few other items real quickly. Always cite your sources properly. We'll discuss citations as we progress through the class. They're going to be important when we get to the presentation portion of the class. When you prepare your individual presentations, you're going to be required to cite a certain number of authoritative sources, or at least legitimate sources, and you've got to do that appropriately. We'll discuss it as we get further along. However, if you have any questions right now, feel free to contact myself or Anna or Lane, the Accounting Writing Lab. We will get back to you and tell you, hey, this is how you should be citing that. As a general rule for this class, though, all you really need to do is cite your source well enough that Anna, Lane, or myself can locate the article, the picture, the, whatever the case is, whatever you're citing, that we can easily locate it and make sure that you are paraphrasing and not plagiarizing, right? You want to minimize white space in the document. So this includes the space between sections, margins, and around any graphics that you may have in the memo, like tables, things like that is what that means. So if you utilize white space correctly, for example, like breaks between your sections, it helps the reader consume the content more easily. However, if you leave your text in one big block and then you've got 3 inches of white space at the bottom of your page, it doesn't look professional. It looks rushed. It doesn't look clean. And it really is just reading a block of text. It makes it less easy for the reader to interpret what you're trying to get across to them. So don't forget that you can utilize formatting. Like we said, formatting is like lists, tables, bold headers, italics, capitalization, anything like that, just like we talked about with emails. Don't forget that you can use formatting and mechanics to make the memo easier to consume. You also want to be using single spacing for your memos, so double spaces between your sections and things like that, but in the actual body of your text, you should just be using single space. That is it for memos. If you have any questions, please do not contact me. Yeah, right. Please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to answer questions, emails, Zoom calls, whatever it is you need help with. Just let me know. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.